The most dangerous Korean Mafia boss in New York was taking his fiancée to a party, until he saw his ex-wife injured on the street corner with twins. Kim Soto adjusted the platinum cufflinks on his tailored Tom Ford suit as his armored black Mercedes S-Class glided through the neon-lit streets of Manhattan. Two SUVs flanked his vehicle on either side, his security detail always watching, always ready. The glittering lights of the city reflected off the tinted windows, illuminating the woman beside him. Laura Martin, 28, ice blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon, a diamond choker catching the light with every tilt of her head. She was everything his world demanded, connected, powerful, ruthless. At 35, Kim had learned that power could buy almost anything, including alliances sealed by marriage. His engagement to Laura was 6 months old. Long enough to secure the family's approval. Short enough to avoid pretending he felt anything beyond calculation. No love, no warmth, no complications, just strategy dressed as romance. My father says the deal with the Yakuza will give us control of the entire East Coast, Laura said, checking her reflection in a compact mirror. Our wedding will solidify the dynasty. Kim said nothing. His sharp dark eyes remained fixed on the road ahead, the tattoos on his hands barely visible beneath his suit sleeves. The traffic light turned red near Chinatown. The crosswalk filled with evening pedestrians, ordinary people living ordinary lives. Unaware that the man watching them from behind bulletproof glass had ended lives with a single command. Kim watched them absently, his mind already calculating tomorrow's weapons shipment, when something made his blood run cold. A woman was limping across the street. She moved slowly, painfully, one arm wrapped in a bandage, the other cradling two babies against her chest. Twins bundled in a worn baby carrier, one in pale blue, one in soft pink. Her natural hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. She looked exhausted. She looked like she'd been fighting a war, alone. A bruise darkened her cheek. Fresh stitches marked her forearm. Even from a distance. Even with her head down. Even after 14 months of forcing himself to forget. Kim knew that face. Phoebe Smith. His ex-wife. The woman he had divorced exactly 1 year and 2 months ago. The babies looked about 6 months old. The timing would be exactly right. Kim's hands that had never trembled holding a blade, now shook against the leather armrest. The world outside seemed to slow as Phoebe paused on the dangerous corner. One of the babies began to fuss. She winced, shifting both infants carefully, pressing a gentle kiss to the crying child's forehead. Humming something soft despite the pain etched across her beautiful face. The baby quieted. She continued limping forward, disappearing into the shadows on the other side of the street. Kim. Laura's voice cut through the fog. The light's green. Your driver is waiting for your signal. He blinked. Cars behind them were honking. His men were glancing back through the rearview mirror, confused by his hesitation. Kim, you look like you've seen a ghost, Laura said, studying his face with cold curiosity. Do you know that woman? Kim forced his expression back to stone. No one important. But his mind was racing. Had Phoebe been pregnant when he divorced her that night, the night he told her they were finished, that she didn't belong in his world, that loving him would only get her killed? Had she been carrying his children? Had she known and chosen not to tell him? Or had she discovered it afterward, alone, abandoned, and made the decision to raise them without him? The questions multiplied, each one more devastating than the last. He had left her to protect her. He had convinced himself that walking away was the noble choice, that a woman like Phoebe deserved safety, not shadows. That she deserved a normal life, not a life spent looking over her shoulder. But now, seeing her injured and struggling, limping through one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in Manhattan with two babies strapped to her chest, Kim realized something that made his carefully constructed world crack down the middle. She had given him children. A son and a daughter. And she had done it completely, utterly alone. while he sat in an armored car beside a woman he didn't love, planning a wedding that meant nothing. Phoebe had been fighting to survive. Fighting to keep their children alive. Fighting a battle he should have been there to fight beside her. One question echoed in his mind, louder than the blood pounding in his ears. What if the life he had been so determined to protect her from was the only life worth living? Before we go deeper, I need you to be honest with yourself. How many times have you watched something that actually moved you, that made you feel, and you just scrolled away? Left no trace you were even there? This is your chance to break that pattern. Subscribe. Not for me. For the version of yourself that craves real stories in a world drowning in shallow content. This story gets darker. More devastating. More beautiful. You'll want to see how love survives violence, how forgiveness happens after abandonment, how two broken people become whole. Hit subscribe. Then let's continue breaking your heart together. The charity gala at the plaza was everything Laura lived for: crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, politicians, and power brokers air-kissing their way through conversations that would reshape the city's underworld. Kim stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, playing the role of devoted fiancé with practiced ease. But his mind was 1,000 miles away. Every time he blinked, he saw Phoebe's face. The exhaustion carved into her features. The bandage on her arm. The way she'd limped across that street corner, cradling two babies against her chest like they were the only things keeping her alive. His babies. The thought made his chest tighten until he could barely breathe. Kim, Senator Morrison is asking about our honeymoon plans, Laura whispered, her smile never faltering as she squeezed his arm. Are you even listening? He turned to the silver-haired man beside them and manufactured a response he wouldn't remember 5 seconds later. The senator laughed. Laura beamed. Kim felt like he was drowning in a room full of air. The moment he could break away, he pulled out his phone and typed a single message to Lang: find everything on Phoebe Smith. I want a full report by morning. Everything. Lang's response came immediately: yes, boss. Kim slipped the phone back into his pocket, but his hand was shaking. Laura was still talking to the senator, oblivious. Around them, Manhattan's elite clinked glasses and made deals that would move millions of dollars by sunrise. And somewhere in this city, Phoebe was probably working a night shift, barely making enough to survive. The party ended just after midnight. Kim dropped Laura at her Upper East Side apartment with a chaste kiss on the cheek and a promise to call her in the morning. The moment his car pulled away, he ordered his driver to take him home. The penthouse in Tribeca felt too large, too empty, too suffocating. Kim poured himself a whiskey he didn't drink and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, in one of those thousands of lit windows, Phoebe might be feeding their children. Changing their diapers. Singing them to sleep. Without him. He didn't even try to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her limping. Saw the bruise on her cheek. Saw the way she'd winced when she shifted the babies in her arms. At exactly 5 a.m., his phone buzzed. Lang was at the door with a manila folder that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Kim took it to his office, sat down at his desk, and opened it with hands that trembled despite his best efforts to steady them. The first page was a basic information sheet. Current address, 1847 Webster Avenue, Bronx. 5th floor. No elevator. Kim's jaw clenched. He knew that neighborhood. One of the most dangerous in the city. Drugs, gangs, violence, the kind of place where gunshots echoed at night and people learned not to look out their windows. Current employment, night shift maid, Meridian Grand Hotel, Midtown Manhattan. Salary, $42,000 per year. $42,000. In New York City. With 2 babies. The math was impossible. Rent alone in even the worst neighborhoods cost more than half that. Formula, diapers, medical care, how was she surviving? He flipped to the next page and felt his stomach drop through the floor. Hospital debt, $94,127.63. Emergency cesarean section performed at 32 weeks gestation due to severe preeclampsia. Patient admitted alone. No family or emergency contacts listed. Kim read that line again. Patient admitted alone. She'd gone into labor at 32 weeks, dangerously premature, and faced it completely by herself. The next page showed birth records. Baby A, female Lila Kim Smith. Born May 3rd, 4:47 a.m. Weight, 3 pounds 2 ounces. Admitted to NICU. Baby B, male Leanne Soto Smith. Born May 3rd, 4:52 a.m. Weight, 2 pounds 14 ounces. Admitted to NICU with respiratory distress. Kim's vision blurred. He blinked hard, forcing himself to focus on the words. She'd given them his names. Both of them. Lila Kim. Leanne Soto. Even after he'd divorced her. Even after he'd walked away. She'd still given their children his names. The medical records went on for pages. Leanne had spent 5 weeks in intensive care, fighting to breathe with underdeveloped lungs. There were notes about Phoebe refusing to leave the hospital, sleeping in a chair beside the incubator, pumping breast milk every 3 hours even though she was still recovering from major surgery. Patient appears emotionally distraught but determined, one nurse had written. Spends 18+ hours daily at infant's bedside. Needs encouragement to eat and rest. Kim's hands were shaking so hard he could barely turn the pages. The next section made him stop breathing entirely. Phone records. Dozens of calls to his office number. His club. Even his penthouse line. All logged. All blocked. Letters. 7 of them. Sent to his personal address. All marked return to sender. Security footage timestamp from his club in Koreatown, Phoebe, visibly pregnant, arguing with the doorman. Being physically escorted off the property. She'd tried. She'd tried everything to reach him. And someone had systematically shut her out. The police report was the final blow. 3 days ago. Assault and attempted robbery. Victim, Phoebe Smith. Injuries, lacerated forearm requiring 12 stitches, bruised ribs, sprained ankle. Suspect, unidentified male, fled the scene. Victim was carrying 2 infant children at the time of the attack. Kim stood so violently his chair toppled backward and crashed to the floor. She'd been attacked while carrying their babies. While walking home from work at 3 in the morning because she couldn't afford a cab. Because she was drowning in debt from saving their son's life. The door to his office opened. Lang stepped inside, his expression carefully neutral. Boss, I. Who gave the orders? Kim's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. Who blocked her calls? Who turned her away? Lang's face went pale. He closed the door behind him and stood with his head bowed, hands clasped in front of him like a man facing execution. I did, Hyeonnim. The silence that followed was deafening. After the divorce, Lang continued, his voice steady despite the fear Kim could see in his eyes. Dylan Wong had men watching her. Following her to work. Sitting outside her apartment. I thought, if she couldn't reach you, if she believed you'd moved on completely, she'd fade from your life. Dylan would lose interest. She'd be safe. Kim moved around the desk slowly, each step deliberate. And when she got pregnant? Lang's voice cracked. I found out when she was 5 months along. By then, she'd stopped trying to contact you. She'd accepted you were gone. I thought telling you would only put a target back on her. I thought. Kim's hand shot out and grabbed Lang by the throat, slamming him against the floor-to-ceiling window with enough force to make the bulletproof glass shatter. Lang didn't fight back. Didn't even raise his hands to defend himself. You stole 14 months, Kim snarled, his face inches from Lang's. You stole my chance to be there when she was pregnant and terrified. You stole my chance to hold my children when they were born. You stole my chance to help her when my son was fighting for his life in an incubator. Lang's eyes were watering, but he held Kim's gaze. I know, Hyungnim. I was wrong. She was mugged. Kim's voice rose to a roar. She was attacked while carrying my children because she was too poor to afford a cab home from work. Because she's drowning in debt from saving our son's life. All while I was sitting in penthouses making deals that mean nothing. He released Lang, shoving him away. The older man collapsed against the window, gasping for air. Kim pulled out his phone with shaking hands. I want protection on her. 24/7. The best men we have. No one gets within 100 feet of her or those babies without clearance. Do you understand? Yes, Hyungnim. Lang's voice was hoarse. Already done. I had men posted outside her building the moment you ordered the investigation. Kim's phone buzzed before he could respond. Unknown number. He answered without thinking, his mind still reeling from everything he'd learned. The voice on the other end made his blood run cold. Kim Soto. Dylan Wong's Mandarin-accented English was smooth as silk and twice as deadly. I have to say, you hit it well. The black woman. The mixed babies. Very touching. Kim's hand tightened on the phone until he heard the case crack. I know you have men watching her now, Dylan continued, almost conversational. But here's the thing about protection, Kim, it only works until it doesn't. And when it doesn't. He paused, letting the silence stretch. Well. Let's see how long they survive. The line went dead. Kim stood frozen, phone still pressed to his ear, as the full weight of his situation crashed down on him. Phoebe and his children weren't just struggling. They were in danger. And this time, he couldn't walk away. The Meridian Grand Hotel in Midtown was the kind of place where guests paid $500 a night for rooms they barely slept in. Kim had been there before, business dinners, backroom meetings, the occasional deal that required neutral territory. Now he stood in the shadows across the street, watching the service entrance, waiting for a woman who had every right to spit in his face. It was 2:47 a.m. when the door finally opened and Phoebe emerged, pulling a worn jacket around her maid's uniform. She was still limping. The bandage on her arm was visible beneath her sleeve. Kim's chest tightened as he watched her move slowly toward the subway entrance, favoring her left leg, one hand pressed against her ribs like they hurt with every breath. She'd worked an 8-hour shift with those injuries. While their baby slept in a 5th-floor walk-up in the Bronx with an elderly neighbor who probably couldn't protect them if something went wrong. He stepped out of the shadows before she could descend into the subway. Phoebe. She froze mid-step. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then she spun around, and the look in her eyes hit him like a physical blow. Once, those eyes had looked at him with love. With trust. With the kind of warmth that made him believe he could be something other than what he was. Now they burned with ice and fire. Don't. Her voice was low, shaking with barely controlled fury. Don't you dare say my name like you have the right. Kim raised his hands, palms out, the universal gesture of peace. The twins. Lila and Lien. They're mine. The laugh that tore from Phoebe's throat was one of the most painful sounds Kim had ever heard. They're my children. She took a step toward him, and despite the limp, despite the exhaustion carved into her face, she looked like a warrior. You signed divorce papers. You walked away without a word. You don't get to claim them now just because you saw us on the street. Dylan Wong threatened you, Kim said, the words tumbling out in a rush. He swore he'd kill anyone I loved. I saw what he did to my cousin's wife, burned her alive in front of her children just to prove a point. When he said you were next, I divorced you to save your life. I thought if I wasn't connected to you anymore, he'd leave you alone. Phoebe's hands clenched into fists at her sides. You didn't give me a choice. Her voice rose, echoing off the empty street. Do you know what it's like to find out you're pregnant 2 weeks after your husband divorces you with no explanation? Do you know what it's like to call and be told Mr. Soto doesn't wish to be contacted by you? Kim felt like someone was driving a knife into his chest with every word. I went to your club, Phoebe continued, her voice breaking. Security dragged me out like I was trash. I wrote letters, they all came back unopened. I stood outside your building in the rain for 3 hours hoping to see you, and your doorman threatened to call the police. Phoebe. I went into labor alone at 32 weeks. Tears were streaming down her face now, but her voice stayed strong. Alone, Kim. No one held my hand while they cut our son out of me. No one told me if he was going to survive. I sat beside Leon's incubator for 18 hours a day, watching him fight for every breath, praying to a God I stopped believing in years ago. While you were probably with her, that blonde woman I saw in your car tonight. The gut punch of that accusation made Kim physically step back. I didn't know you were pregnant, he said, his voice rough. I swear to God, Phoebe, I didn't know. If I had. If you had known, what? She cut him off with a slash of her hand. You would have stayed? No. You would have made the same choice. You decided I wasn't worth the risk. You decided I was too weak, too black, too other to survive in your world. There it was. The wound he'd tried to tell himself didn't exist. That's not true, Kim said, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Then who blocked me? Phoebe demanded. Who gave the orders to turn me away? Who made sure I couldn't reach you even when I was pregnant and terrified? Lang. My second in command. He acted without my knowledge. Phoebe stared at him for a long moment, and Kim saw the war playing out behind her eyes, wanting to believe him, refusing to be hurt again. It doesn't matter, she finally said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You still left. You still chose your reputation, your safety, your world over me. Over us. Kim's phone vibrated in his pocket. He ignored it. It vibrated again, insistent. Answer it, Phoebe said bitterly. I'm sure it's important. He pulled it out and glanced at the screen. Text from Lang, Dylan Wong's men are moving. Heading toward the Bronx. Toward Phoebe's building. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Kim looked up at Phoebe, and she must have seen something in his face because her expression shifted from anger to fear. What? You're in danger. Right now. He stepped forward and grabbed her arm, gently, but firm. Dylan Wong knows about you and the babies. He has men heading to your apartment right now. Phoebe jerked away from him. You're lying. This is some kind of manipulation. I'm not lying. Kim pulled up the text and showed her. Lang has men protecting your building, but I need to get you somewhere safe. Somewhere I can actually protect you. Lila and Lien, Phoebe's voice cracked with panic. Who's watching them? Mrs. Chen. My neighbor. She's 70 years old, Kim, she can't. My men won't let anyone near your apartment, Kim said. But we need to go. Now. I'll get you and the baby somewhere Dylan Wong can't touch you. Phoebe looked at him, and Kim saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. She didn't trust him. Didn't want his help. But she was thinking about 2 babies sleeping in a building with a broken front door lock, in a neighborhood where gunshots were just background noise. Just tonight, she finally said, her voice hard as steel. You get us somewhere safe tonight. Tomorrow, I figure out what to do next. And this doesn't mean I forgive you, Kim. This doesn't mean anything except that I'm a mother and I'll do whatever it takes to keep my children alive. Understood. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called Mrs. Chen, speaking in rapid, urgent tones. When she hung up, she looked at Kim with eyes that held 14 months of pain. "If you're lying to me," she said quietly, "if this is some kind of game, I will make you regret it in ways you can't imagine." Kim believed her. His car pulled up to the curb, the same Mercedes that had driven him past her on the street hours earlier. The same car where Laura had sat, oblivious, planning a wedding that would never happen. Phoebe climbed into the back seat, as far from Kim as possible, her arms wrapped around herself like armor. As they drove toward the Bronx to collect their children, Kim stared out the window and realized something that made his carefully constructed world feel like it was built on sand. He'd spent 14 months trying to keep Phoebe safe by staying away. All he'd done was make sure she suffered alone. The penthouse in Tribeca was a fortress. Bulletproof glass wrapping the entire 52nd floor. Biometric security. Panic rooms on every level. The kind of place where Kim could watch the city spread out below him and know that nothing could touch him here. Phoebe stood in the marble foyer holding Lila and Lien, both babies miraculously still asleep despite being carried down 5 flights of stairs and driven across the city, and looked around with an expression Kim couldn't read. "Guest room is this way," he said quietly, leading her down the hall. The room was larger than her entire Bronx apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows with automated blackout shades. A king-size bed with sheets that cost more than her monthly rent. And in the corner, a brand-new crib still in its packaging. Kim had texted ahead and had his housekeeper set it up while they were in transit. Phoebe stood in the doorway, staring at the crib. Then at the worn baby carrier she'd brought from home, patched with duct tape in 2 places. "This is the first time they've ever slept somewhere new," she said softly. "The first time they've had a crib that wasn't bought second-hand." She walked over and gently laid the babies down, Lila on the left, Lien on the right. They immediately found each other's hands in their sleep, tiny fingers interlocking. Kim watched from the doorway, his throat tight. These were his children. 6 months old. And he was seeing them sleep for the first time. "I'll be right next door if you need anything," he said. Phoebe pulled a chair up beside the crib and sat down, her eyes never leaving the babies. "I'm not sleeping," she said. "I'll keep watch." Kim wanted to tell her she was safe here. That she didn't need to keep watch anymore. But the words died in his throat because he knew she wouldn't believe them. So he just nodded and left her there, pulling the door partially closed behind him. Downstairs in his office, 4 of his lieutenants were waiting. Lang stood slightly apart from the others, his expression carefully neutral despite the bruises already forming on his throat from where Kim had slammed him against the window hours earlier. Kim closed the door and locked it. "Explain," he said to Lang, his voice deadly calm. "Every detail. I want to know exactly what you did." Lang bowed deeply, the formal gesture of a man accepting responsibility for grave mistakes. "After the divorce, I had surveillance on Phoebe Smith," he began, his Korean formal and precise. Dylan Wong's men were watching her. Following her to work. Photographing her. "I assessed that she was in immediate danger as long as you were connected." "So you cut off all contact," Kim said. "Yes, Hyungnim." Lang's jaw tightened. "I gave orders to block her calls. Return her letters. Turn her away if she appeared at any of your properties. I told everyone the orders came from you." One of the other lieutenants inhaled sharply. Using the boss's name without authorization was grounds for execution in their world. "And when she got pregnant?" Kim's voice was getting quieter, more dangerous. "I found out when she was 5 months along. One of our men saw her at a free clinic in the Bronx." Lang's voice wavered for the first time. "By then, she'd stopped trying to contact you. She'd accepted that you were gone. I thought, if I told you, you'd go to her. Dylan Wong would see. The threat would restart." Kim moved so fast no one saw it coming. One moment he was standing behind his desk. The next, he had Lang by the throat, slamming him against the floor-to-ceiling window hard enough to make the bulletproof glass shatter. You stole 14 months. Kim's voice was a roar that probably carried through the entire penthouse. You stole my chance to be there when she was pregnant and terrified. You stole my chance to hold my children when they were born. You stole my chance to help her when my son, was fighting for his life in an incubator. Lang didn't fight back. Didn't even raise his hands. Just took it, his face going red from lack of oxygen. She was mugged. Kim's voice cracked. She was attacked while carrying my children because she couldn't afford a cab home. Because she's drowning in almost $100,000 in debt from saving our son's life. All while I was making weapons deals that meant nothing. He released Lang and shoved him away. The older man collapsed against the window, gasping. You left her to nearly die in childbirth, Kim continued, his breathing ragged. Alone. At 32 weeks. Emergency surgery. No one to hold her hand. No one to tell her everything would be okay. While I was thousands of miles away, clueless, because you decided you knew better. I was wrong, Hyungnim. Lang's voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. I know. There's no excuse. I thought I was protecting everyone. I was wrong. Kim wanted to kill him. Wanted to throw him through that window and watch him fall 52 stories. Wanted to make him feel even a fraction of the pain Phoebe had endured. But then a soft voice came from the doorway. He's telling the truth. Everyone turned. Phoebe stood there in worn sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt, arms wrapped around herself, having clearly heard everything. Her eyes found Lang. You blocked me. All those times I called, all those letters, that was you. Lang bowed his head. Yes. And Kim didn't know I was pregnant. No. He didn't know until tonight. Phoebe looked at Kim, and for the first time since he'd seen her on that street corner, the rage in her eyes dimmed slightly. Not gone. Not forgiven. But, understanding. You really divorced me because of Dylan Wong, she said quietly. Not because I wasn't Korean enough. Not because I didn't fit your world. Kim felt something crack open in his chest. Never. God, Phoebe, never. I left because I was terrified he'd kill you. Because I'd seen what he did to people I loved and I couldn't. I couldn't risk it. A tear slid down her cheek. Just one. You didn't trust me to make that choice myself. No. I didn't. And that was wrong. They stared at each other across the office, 14 months of pain and lies and misunderstanding hanging in the air between them. Finally, Phoebe turned back to Lang. Those men you posted outside my building. They're good? The best we have. And they'll keep my babies safe? With their lives. I swear it. Phoebe nodded slowly. Then she looked at Kim. I'm going to check on Lila and Lien. Tomorrow, we figure out what happens next. Tonight, I just need to know they're safe. She turned and walked out, leaving the men in silence. Kim released a breath he didn't know he'd been holding and turned back to Lang. You will protect them, he said, his voice cold and final. Every second. Every breath. You will dedicate your life to making sure nothing happens to Phoebe or those babies. If one hair on their heads is harmed, I will kill you slowly. Do you understand? Yes, Hyungnim. Lang bowed deeply. I understand. As the lieutenants filed out, Kim stood at the window and looked out over the city. Somewhere out there, Dylan Wong was planning his next move. Laura was probably calling her father, setting political and criminal wheels in motion for revenge. But up here, in this fortress, his children were sleeping safely for the first time in their lives. And Phoebe, broken, exhausted, magnificent Phoebe, had heard the truth. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even close. But it was a start. Morning light flooded the penthouse through floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the marble and glass into something ethereal. Kim had been awake since dawn, unable to sleep, sitting in his office reviewing security protocols and trying not to think about the woman and 2 babies sleeping down the hall. The sound of the front door opening made him look up. He'd forgotten Laura had a key. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, Louboutins, probably, the red soles flashing with each step. She was dressed for brunch in a cream-colored dress that cost more than most people made in a month, her blonde hair perfectly styled, diamonds at her throat and wrists. "Kim?" Her voice carried through the penthouse. "Darling, we're going to be late for the fundraiser." "Why aren't you?" She stopped mid-sentence. Kim emerged from his office to find Laura frozen in the entrance to the kitchen, staring at something with an expression he'd never seen on her face before. Phoebe sat at the breakfast bar in one of Kim's old t-shirts and sweatpants, spooning baby food into Lila's mouth while Lien banged his tiny fists on the tray of his high chair. Both babies were babbling, and Phoebe was humming softly, completely absorbed in the simple act of feeding her children. Kim's children. Laura's eyes swept from Phoebe's natural hair, pulled back in a messy bun, to her dark skin, to the 2 mixed-race babies with their father's eyes and their mother's warm brown skin. Something ugly flickered across Laura's perfectly made-up face before she schooled her expression into cold neutrality. "Who is this?" Her voice could have cut glass. Phoebe looked up, spoon frozen halfway to Lila's mouth. Her eyes met Laura's, then shifted to Kim with a question he couldn't answer. "Laura." Kim stepped into the kitchen, positioning himself between the 2 women. "I didn't expect you this morning. I asked you a question." Laura's finger shot out, pointing at Phoebe like she was something distasteful. "Who is she?" Kim felt something settle in his chest, a decision he'd been avoiding since the moment he saw Phoebe on that street corner. A choice he should have made 14 months ago. "My ex-wife," he said clearly. "And those are my children." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the babies seemed to sense something momentous happening, their babbling fading to quiet whimpers. Laura's face drained of color, then flushed an angry red that clashed with her carefully coordinated outfit. "You're what?" Her voice rose to a pitch that made Lila start crying. "You have children with her?" The way she said her, dripping with disgust and something darker, made Phoebe stiffen. She pulled Lila out of the high chair, holding her daughter protectively against her chest, her eyes fixed on Laura with the wariness of someone who'd faced this kind of hatred before. Kim stepped fully between them, blocking Laura's line of sight to Phoebe and the babies. "Watch your tone, Laura." She laughed, high and shrill. "Watch my tone. Are you insane? You're going to destroy our engagement, destroy our family's alliance, destroy the Yakuza deal, for a black maid and 2 illegitimate babies?" Behind him, Kim heard Phoebe's sharp intake of breath. Felt the weight of those words landing like blows. His voice dropped to something deadly quiet. "Those are my son and daughter. If you speak about them that way again, you will regret it." "Oh, I'll regret it." Laura's rage was boiling over now, all pretense of sophistication gone. "My father has invested millions in this partnership. Do you have any idea what this will do to your reputation? Leaving me, for her? For some woman you knocked up and abandoned? The entire underworld will see you as weak. Every family we've aligned with will turn on you." Kim walked past her to his office, opened a drawer, and pulled out the engagement ring Laura had spent 3 weeks selecting, a massive diamond that had cost more than Phoebe's annual salary. He walked back and held it out to her. "Alliances can be rebuilt," he said calmly. "Reputation can be repaired. But time with my children? That can't be bought back." Laura stared at the ring like it was a snake. Then at Kim. Then at Phoebe, who was now holding both babies, one in each arm, her face carefully blank. You're choosing them over me, Laura said, her voice dropping to something venomous. Over everything we built. Over power. Over the future we planned. Yes. That single word seemed to echo in the vast space of the penthouse. Laura snatched the ring from his palm and threw it at his feet. The diamond skittered across the marble with a sound like breaking glass. You'll pay for this humiliation, Kim Soto. Her voice was shaking with fury. My father won't forget this insult. Dylan Wong won't stop hunting them. And when your little family is dead, when she's gone and those babies are gone, remember this moment. Remember that you chose this. She spun on her heel and stormed toward the door, then stopped and looked back at Phoebe one last time. Enjoy it while it lasts, she said, her smile cruel. Men like him don't stay with women like you. You're just a novelty. A mistake he'll regret. The door slammed behind her hard enough to rattle the windows. The silence that followed was deafening. Kim turned to find Phoebe still standing in the kitchen, holding both babies, tears streaming silently down her face. Not from Laura's words, Phoebe looked like she'd heard variations of that cruelty her entire life. But from something else. Something deeper. You just made a very powerful enemy, she whispered. Why? Kim crossed the space between them and dropped to his knees in front of her. At eye level with his children, Lila staring at him with wide, curious eyes, Lien already reaching for his father's face with chubby fingers. Because they're mine, he said quietly. And so are you. You always were. Phoebe's breath caught. More tears fell, but she didn't look away. I destroyed you, she said, her voice breaking. Financially, I destroyed you. Your empire, your alliances, your future, all of it. For what? For a maid with 2 babies you didn't even know existed until 2 days ago? No. Kim reached up and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. I destroyed myself 14 months ago when I walked away from you. Everything since then has just been pretending the destruction didn't happen. Lien grabbed Kim's finger and squeezed with surprising strength for a 6-month-old. The baby gurgled, pleased with himself. I can't promise you I'll be good at this, Kim continued. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to change diapers or mix formula or do any of the things you've been doing alone for 6 months. But I'm going to learn. And I'm not walking away again. Not ever. Phoebe stood there, holding their children, looking down at the most dangerous man in New York kneeling at her feet like a supplicant. Something shifted in her expression. Not forgiveness, it was too soon for that, too much pain still raw and bleeding. But understanding. The beginning of belief that maybe, just maybe, he meant what he said. Lila needs her diaper changed, she said softly. And Lien's formula is in the fridge. If you're serious about learning. Kim stood, took Lien from her arms, the first time he'd ever held his son, and felt his entire world realign around the weight of that tiny body. Teach me, he said. And for the first time since he'd seen her on that street corner, Phoebe smiled. Just a small one. Just a crack in the armor. But it was there. The first attempt at mixing formula was a disaster. Kim stood in the kitchen staring at the canister like it was a bomb he needed to defuse, Lien screaming in his arms while Phoebe fed Lila in the living room. The instructions seemed simple enough. Water. Powder. Mix. He heated the water too hot. The first bottle was scalding. He tried again, adding cold water this time. Too cold. Lien's screams intensified. Third attempt, he dumped in too much powder. The formula came out thick as paste, completely undrinkable. Do you need help? Phoebe appeared in the doorway, Lila contentedly chewing on her fist. No. Kim's jaw was set with determination. I'm figuring it out. Fourth attempt. Lukewarm water. Exact measurement of powder. Shake gently, not too hard. He'd learned that lesson when formula exploded all over the counter on attempt 2. The bottle was perfect. Lien latched onto it like he'd been starving, his little body relaxing in Kim's arms as he drank. See? Phoebe said softly. You figured it out. The diaper change was worse. Kim laid Lien on the changing table, expensive, designer, still had the tags on, and stared down at his son like he was facing a military operation. How hard could it be? Very hard, as it turned out. The first diaper went on backward. Lien immediately peed, soaking through his onesie. The second diaper, Kim managed to get the tabs stuck to themselves instead of the diaper. The third time, just as Kim was congratulating himself on finally getting it right, Lien peed directly on him, a perfect arc that hit Kim's Tom Ford shirt. Phoebe, watching from the doorway, tried to hide her laugh behind her hand. Failed completely. It's not funny, Kim muttered, but even he was smiling a little. It's a little funny, she admitted. That night, Kim didn't sleep. Not because he couldn't, but because he'd told Phoebe he'd handle the night shift. Let her rest for the first time in 6 months. Lila woke up crying at 2 a.m. Kim was there in seconds, lifting her from the crib, pacing the nursery while humming a song his own mother used to sing to him. Korean words he hadn't thought about in years, a lullaby about stars and dreams and children who were loved. Lila quieted almost immediately, her tiny hand gripping his finger as he walked back and forth in the darkness. At 4 a.m., Lien's turn. Kim repeated the process, bottle, burping, walking, singing. His son stared up at him with eyes that were identical to Kim's own, and Kim felt something crack open in his chest. At 5:30 a.m., both babies woke up. Kim somehow managed to hold both of them, one in each arm, singing that same lullaby until they drifted back to sleep. When morning came, Phoebe found him still in the nursery, sitting in the rocking chair with both babies asleep against his chest. He'd finally dozed off, his head tilted back, exhaustion written across his face. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching. This man who'd broken her heart. This man who'd left her to face the hardest moments of her life alone. This man who was trying. The call from the hospital came 3 days later. Phoebe was feeding Lila when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Miss Smith? This is Beth from the billing department at Presbyterian Hospital. I'm calling about your account. Phoebe's stomach dropped. She'd been dodging their calls for weeks, unable to face another conversation about payment plans she couldn't afford. I know I'm behind, she started. But if you could just give me another month. Actually, Miss Smith, I'm calling because your balance has been paid in full. The bottle slipped from Phoebe's hand, formula splashing across the floor. What? Paid in full. A law firm called yesterday and wired the full amount. $94,127.63. Your account is clear. Phoebe ended the call and marched straight to Kim's office. He was on his laptop, probably doing something illegal and highly profitable, but he looked up when she slammed the door. You paid my debt. It wasn't a question. Yes. I don't need you to buy me, Kim. He closed the laptop and stood, his expression serious. I'm not buying you. That $94,000 should have been my responsibility from the moment you went into labor. You carried that debt alone because I wasn't there. I'm fixing what I should have done 14 months ago. That's not. It is, he interrupted, his voice firm. You nearly died giving birth to our children. Our son spent 5 weeks fighting to breathe. You sat beside his incubator for 18 hours a day while recovering from major surgery. Alone. And then you got a bill that would take you years to pay off. That should have been my burden to carry. Not yours. Phoebe wanted to argue. Wanted to throw his money back in his face and prove she didn't need him. But he was right. And she was so tired of carrying everything alone. Thank you, she whispered. The milestone came unexpectedly. Phoebe had laid Lian on his play mat in the living room, encouraging him to practice pushing up on his arms. Kim was reading the Wall Street Journal nearby, or pretending to. Really, he was watching his son with barely concealed fascination. Lian pushed up. Rocked back. Pushed up again. Then, with a grunt of effort that seemed impossibly loud from such a small body, he rolled completely over onto his back. Kim. Phoebe's shout made him drop the newspaper. Kim, come here. He was across the room in seconds, his hand already reaching for the gun he kept in a shoulder holster, scanning for threats. He rolled over. Phoebe was filming on her phone, tears streaming down her face. Lian just rolled over by himself. Kim stared down at his son, who looked enormously pleased with himself, waving his arms and legs in celebration. He did? Watch, he's going to do it again, Lian, baby, show daddy. And Lian did. Rolled from his back to his stomach like he'd been doing it his whole life, then looked up at Kim with an expression that clearly said, "Did you see that? Did you see what I did?" Kim dropped to his knees beside the play mat, his hand gentle on Lian's back. You did it, buddy. You did it. It was the first time Phoebe had heard his voice break with anything other than anger or pain. That night, after the babies were asleep, Phoebe did something she hadn't planned to do. She sat beside Kim on the couch and unlocked her phone. These are the things you missed, she said quietly. The first video, Lila's first smile at 6 weeks old. Filmed in the cramped Bronx apartment, Phoebe's tired voice cooing at the camera. Look at you, beautiful girl. Look at that smile. Next, Lian's first laugh at 3 months. A sound like bubbles, pure joy, Phoebe tickling his tiny feet. More videos. Dozens of them. Bath time. Tummy time. The first time Lila grabbed her own toes. The first time Lian held a rattle. Small moments that meant everything. Kim watched every single one without speaking. But tears streamed down his face, silent and unstoppable. When the last video ended, Lila and Lian holding hands in their sleep, their tiny fingers intertwined, he couldn't speak for a long moment. Finally, I'll never miss another moment. I swear it. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do, I'll be here. For all of it. Phoebe looked at him, this dangerous man crying over videos of his children, and felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. The scream ripped through the penthouse at 2:47 a.m. Kim was out of bed before his mind fully processed the sound, muscle memory from years of violence sending him into the hallway. His hand found the gun in the drawer beside his bed, safety off, finger on the trigger. Another scream. Not from the nursery. From Phoebe's room. He burst through the door to find her thrashing in the bed, sheets tangled around her legs, her face twisted in terror even though her eyes were closed. Please don't leave me, she sobbed, still asleep. Please. I'll be better. I promise I'll be better. Don't go. Don't go. Kim set the gun on the dresser and climbed onto the bed, gathering her into his arms. Phoebe. Baby, wake up. It's just a nightmare. I'm here. She fought him at first, still trapped in whatever hell her sleeping mind had constructed. But gradually his voice penetrated the darkness. Her eyes opened, wild and disoriented. For a moment she didn't seem to recognize where she was. Then she saw Kim and something broke. Not silent tears this time. Not the controlled grief she'd shown him before. This was complete devastation. Wrenching sobs that shook her entire body, sounds torn from somewhere deep and wounded that she'd kept locked away for too long. Kim just held her, rocking slightly, his hand smoothing her hair. What was the nightmare about? He asked when her sobs finally quieted to hiccuping breaths. Phoebe was silent for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper. My childhood. She told him things she'd never told anyone. About growing up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs and still couldn't make ends meet. About wearing second-hand clothes to school and being mocked for it. About watching her mother literally work herself to death by the time Phoebe was 19. She died of exhaustion, Phoebe said, her voice hollow. The doctors called it heart failure, but I know the truth. She worked herself into the ground trying to give me a better life, and it killed her. Kim held her tighter. And then there's the other stuff. Phoebe's voice hardened. Do you know how many times I've been told I'm pretty for a black girl? How many men have dated me like I'm some exotic experiment? How many people have looked at me the way your fiancé did this morning, like I'm less than human? Ex-fiancé, Kim murmured. When you divorced me. Phoebe's voice cracked. I thought it was because I wasn't enough. Not Korean enough. Not light-skinned enough. Not appropriate for a mafia boss. I thought you finally realized what everyone else had been telling me my whole life, that I don't belong in places like this. Kim pulled back just enough to look at her face. That was never true. Not for 1 second. But I believed it. And then I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after you left, and I was so scared. I went into labor at 32 weeks. Emergency C-section. I woke up alone in recovery, and the first thing the nurse told me was that Lian might not make it. That his lungs were too underdeveloped. That I needed to prepare myself. Her tears started again, quieter this time but no less painful. I sat beside that incubator for 18 hours a day. Sometimes more. I couldn't afford to miss work, but I missed it anyway because I couldn't leave him. I was rationing formula at home because I had to choose between feeding Lila or paying rent. I walked 40 blocks home one night to save subway fare and got mugged. She looked up at Kim, her eyes red and swollen. Do you know what I thought while that man was hitting me? While I was trying to protect the babies and he was ripping my purse away? I thought, if I die here, who will take care of Lila and Lian? Who will love them? Kim felt like someone was crushing his heart in a vice. I'm scared, Kim. Her voice dropped to barely audible. I'm scared you'll wake up one day and realize I'm too much trouble. That we're too different. That a black woman with 2 mixed babies doesn't fit in your world. That you'll leave again, and this time I won't survive it. I'm not leaving. Kim cupped her face in his hands, making sure she looked at him. Not for Dylan Wong. Not for Laura or her father or anyone else. Not because things get hard or dangerous or complicated. I'm here. For you. For Lila and Lian. Forever. I haven't forgiven you, Phoebe whispered. Not completely. Maybe not ever. You left me when I needed you most, and I don't know if I can ever forget what that felt like. I know. And I'll wait as long as it takes. Years, if that's what you need. I'll wait. They sat in the darkness together, holding each other. From the nursery down the hall, they could hear the soft, synchronized breathing of 2 babies sleeping peacefully. Phoebe rested her head against Kim's chest, listening to his heartbeat. I'm trying to trust you again, she said softly. It's hard. But I'm trying. That's enough, Kim said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. That's more than I deserve. They stayed like that until dawn broke over the city, neither of them sleeping, just holding on to each other like lifelines in a storm that had been raging for 14 months. When morning came and the babies started fussing for their breakfast, Phoebe pulled away and looked at Kim with eyes that were still red but somehow clearer. Lila likes her bottle warm, she said. Not hot. Just warm. It was an offering. An invitation to try again. Kim took it. Can we just stop for a second? Because if your chest is tight right now, if you felt Phoebe's pain when she talked about being pretty for a black girl, if you understood Kim's terror of loving someone so much it could destroy them, then you know why I tell these stories. This is real pain. Real racial trauma. Real abandonment. Real love trying to survive impossible odds. And if you value content that doesn't insult your intelligence, that doesn't shy away from the hard conversations about race and class and sacrifice, you owe it to yourself to subscribe. Because you need to know stories like this exist. That someone's still creating things that matter. Hit subscribe. We're about to enter the darkest part of this story. You won't want to miss what happens next. The call came at 4 a.m., an emergency that couldn't wait, couldn't be delegated, couldn't be ignored. The Yakuza families were fracturing over territory disputes in Seoul, and Kim's presence was the only thing that could prevent a full-scale war that would destabilize the entire East Asian operation. I don't want to go, Kim said, standing in the nursery doorway watching Phoebe rock Lian back to sleep after a feeding. The baby's eyes were already drifting closed, his tiny fist wrapped around his mother's finger. Then don't, Phoebe whispered, not looking up. If I don't, people die. Innocent people caught in crossfire. Alliances collapse. It could take years to rebuild. She finally met his eyes. How long? 2 days. 3 at most. He stepped into the room, his voice dropping lower. I'm tripling security. Lang will be here personally. I'm putting men on every floor, every entrance, every possible access point. You'll be safer here than anywhere else in the city. Phoebe looked down at Lian, now fully asleep against her chest, then over at Lila dreaming peacefully in the crib. Dylan Wong is still out there. I know. That's why I'm leaving Lang. He'll protect you with his life. I trust him with that, even after everything. Do you have to go? Kim crossed to her and knelt beside the rocking chair, his hand gentle on Lian's back. If there was any other way, I'd take it. But this is the last piece of my old life I need to handle. After this, I'm done. No more meetings in Seoul. No more deals that take me away from you and the babies. This is the last time, Phoebe. I swear it. She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. 2 days. 2 days. He left at dawn, but not before checking every lock, every security protocol, every guard rotation twice. Lang stood in the foyer as Kim gave his final instructions, his expression grave and determined. Nothing gets through, Kim said, his hand gripping Lang's shoulder. Not a mouse. Not a shadow. Nothing. Yes, Hyunnim. On my life. Kim looked back one last time at Phoebe standing in the hallway holding both babies, one in each arm. She looked small in the vast penthouse, vulnerable despite the fortress around her. 2 days, she called softly. 2 days, he promised. The first day passed without incident. Phoebe settled into a routine with extra security visible but unobtrusive, men stationed at every entrance, cameras monitoring every corner. She fed the twins, played with them on their mat, sang them Korean lullabies Kim had been teaching her. By nightfall, she almost felt safe. At 11 p.m., she carried the twins to the nursery for their final feeding before bed. Lila had already dozed off, and Lian was fighting sleep with the determination of a 6-month-old who didn't want to miss anything. Phoebe hummed softly, swaying back and forth, watching the city lights twinkle through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The sound of shattering glass made her freeze. For one heartbeat, she thought she'd imagined it. Then the alarm started screaming. Gunfire erupted from somewhere below, sharp cracks that echoed through the penthouse like thunder. Men shouting in Korean. More gunshots, closer now. Phoebe's training kicked in, the panic room Kim had shown her on her second day here. She grabbed both babies, pressing them against her chest despite their startled cries, and ran. The hallway seemed impossibly long. The panic room door was visible at the end, reinforced steel disguised as decorative paneling. 10 more feet. 8. 6. A shadow detached itself from the alcove beside her. Jihyun. She recognized him, one of Kim's guards, younger than Lang, always professional. He'd brought her coffee that morning and smiled at the twins. Now his gun was pointed at her chest. "Sorry, Mrs. Soto." His voice was almost apologetic. "Just business." Phoebe didn't think. She launched herself at him, one arm wrapped around both babies, the other clawing at his face. Her nails drew blood across his cheek. She kicked hard, aiming for his knee, his groin, anything vulnerable. But she was holding two screaming infants, and he was twice her size and trained to kill. His fist caught her temple. The world exploded in white light and pain. She staggered but somehow stayed upright, curling her body around Lila and Lien even as she fell to her knees. "Give them to me," Jihan said, reaching down. "No." Phoebe's scream was primal. She tried to crawl away, still clutching the babies, but he grabbed her hair and yanked her backward. Her grip loosened. He tore Lien from her arms, then Lila. Both babies were shrieking now, reaching for their mother with tiny desperate hands. Phoebe tried to stand, tried to fight, tried to do anything. Jihan's boot caught her in the ribs. Something cracked. She collapsed, gasping, the taste of copper flooding her mouth. "Give them back." She was crawling toward him, leaving a trail of blood from where her head had split open. "Please. They're babies. Please." He looked down at her with something like pity, then kicked her again. This time in the face. Everything went black. In Seoul, Kim sat at a conference table with 8 Yakuza lieutenants, negotiating territory boundaries that would prevent a war. The meeting had dragged into its 6th hour. Everyone was exhausted, tempers fraying, but they were close to agreement. So close. His phone buzzed against his thigh. He ignored it. Phones off during negotiations was an absolute rule. It buzzed again. Then again. Insistent. Kim glanced down. Unknown number. Video message. Every instinct he'd honed over 15 years in this life started screaming. He stood abruptly, every eye in the room turning to him. "Excuse me." He walked into the hallway and opened the message. The world stopped. Phoebe was tied to a chair in what looked like a warehouse. Her face was a mass of bruises, already swelling. Blood dripped from her split lip onto her shirt, Kim's shirt, he realized, one of his old t-shirts she'd been sleeping in. Behind her, 15 feet away, was a metal cage. Inside the cage, Lila and Lien screamed. The camera moved, and Dylan Wong stepped into frame. Mid-40s, scar bisecting his jaw, eyes like a dead shark's. Kim had seen those eyes in nightmares for 14 months. "Hello, Kim." Dylan's Mandarin-accented English was conversational, almost friendly. "Surprised? You thought divorcing her would save her. Stupid. Love doesn't work that way. Now she's mine. The babies too." The camera panned, and Kim's blood turned to ice. Laura stood beside Dylan, perfectly made up, smiling. "You humiliated me, Kim. You destroyed my reputation. My father's alliances. Our future. Now I'll watch you suffer." Dylan moved closer to Phoebe, gripping her hair and forcing her head back. "You have 1 hour. Red Hook Warehouse 9. Come alone. If I see your men, if I even suspect backup, I'll kill one baby every 5 minutes." He smiled. "Then I'll kill her. Then I'll burn the bodies and send you the ashes." Phoebe lifted her head, and despite the blood and bruises, despite the terror in her eyes, she looked directly at the camera. "Don't come." Her scream was raw. "It's a trap. Save yourself." Dylan's hand cracked across her face. Her head snapped sideways. The video ended. Kim stood in that Seoul hallway, phone in his shaking hand, and felt something inside him splinter and reshape into something lethal. He didn't remember walking back into the conference room. didn't remember the faces of the men who'd been negotiating. He just turned to his own lieutenants and said in Korean, "We're leaving. Now. Hyungnim, the deal. Now." 20 minutes later, he was in his private jet. Lang was already on the phone, voice crisp with controlled fury. "All units converge on Red Hook. Full tactical gear. I want snipers on every roof within 1,000 yards of Warehouse 9. No one engages until I give the signal." Kim sat in the leather seat, staring at nothing, his mind calculating trajectories and outcomes and the 1,000 ways this could end with his family dead. "How long until we land?" he asked, his voice barely recognizable. 3 hours 40 minutes. Too long. It was going to be too long. Kim closed his eyes and saw Phoebe's face in that video. Saw his babies crying in a cage. Saw the blood and the terror and the desperate hope in her eyes when she screamed at him not to come. He opened them again and met Lang's gaze across the cabin. "We go to war," Kim said quietly. "Yes, Hyungnim," Lang replied. "We go to war." Red Hook at midnight was a graveyard of industrial buildings and forgotten warehouses, the kind of place where screams wouldn't carry and bodies disappeared into the East River without questions. Warehouse 9 loomed at the end of a dead-end street, its rusted metal walls reflecting nothing but darkness. Kim's Mercedes stopped a block away. He stepped out alone, dressed in the same suit he'd worn to Seoul, now wrinkled, blood-stained where he'd gripped his own chest, hands raised, walking steadily toward the warehouse's main entrance. 20 guns tracked his movement from the roofline. 20 fingers on 20 triggers, all belonging to Dylan Wong's men. The warehouse door hung open, spilling weak light onto the cracked pavement. Kim stepped through. The space was vast and empty except for the scene staged in its center like a twisted tableau. 20 of Dylan's men formed a perimeter, assault rifles aimed inward. In the middle stood Dylan Wong himself, one hand resting casually on Phoebe's shoulder as she sat tied to a metal chair. 15 feet to her left, the cage held both babies. Lila and Lian were still crying, their faces red and tear-streaked, reaching through the bars toward their mother. The sound cut through Kim like broken glass. Dylan smiled. The great Kim Soto. Walking into certain death for a black woman and half-breed babies. How the mighty fall. Kim's eyes swept the space, cataloging exits, weapons, angles. His gaze landed on Phoebe and stayed there. Her face was worse in person, one eye swollen completely shut, blood dried on her chin and neck, her breathing shallow and pained. But she was alive. "Let them go," Kim said, his voice ice. "You want me, not them." "Oh, I want you to suffer first." Dylan circled behind Phoebe, trailing his fingers across her shoulders. She flinched but didn't cry out. "I want you to watch. I want you to understand what happens when people cross me." Movement to Kim's right. Laura emerged from the shadows, a pistol in her perfectly manicured hand. She walked to Phoebe and pressed the barrel against her temple. "This is for humiliating me," Laura said, her voice shaking with rage. "For choosing her over everything I offered you. For making me a laughingstock." Phoebe's eyes found Kim's across the space. Despite the gun at her head, despite the terror that had to be clawing through her, she looked at him with something like peace. "I forgive you," she said clearly. "Whatever happens, Kim, I forgive you. Tell Lila and Lian their mother loved them." Something broke open in Kim's chest. He'd spent weeks trying to earn her forgiveness, and now she was giving it to him while staring down death. He put 2 fingers to his lips and whistled, sharp, 2 notes that cut through the warehouse like a blade. Everything exploded. The back entrance blew inward in a shower of sparks and metal. Lang charged through with 30 men, tactical gear, assault rifles already firing. The windows shattered as snipers opened up from the rooflines outside. Dylan's men scattered, returning fire, the warehouse transforming into a war zone in seconds. Kim was already moving. He lunged for Phoebe, a blade appearing in his hand, hidden in his sleeve, always there, always ready. He cut her ropes with 2 quick slashes. She fell forward and he caught her, pushing her down behind the metal chair as bullets screamed overhead. Across the warehouse, Lang fought his way toward the cage. 2 of Dylan's guards blocked his path. Lang shot the first in the chest, dodged the second's return fire, and put 2 rounds through his skull. He reached the cage and smashed the lock with the butt of his rifle. The cage door swung open. Lang reached in and lifted both screaming babies, tucking them against his body armor, one arm wrapped around each tiny body. Dylan Wong stepped into the open, gun raised, aimed directly at Lang and the twins. Kim saw it happen in slow motion. Dylan's finger tightening on the trigger. The barrel steady, trained on the man holding Kim's children. The certainty in Dylan's dead eyes that this shot would land. Kim didn't think. Didn't calculate. Didn't weigh the cost. He just moved. Threw himself between Dylan and Lang. Spread his arms wide. Made his body the shield. The gunshot was impossibly loud. The impact hit Kim's chest like a sledgehammer. He staggered, looked down, saw crimson blooming across his white shirt in an expanding circle. Behind him, Lang pivoted and fired. The bullet caught Dylan Wong between the eyes. The Chinese Mafia boss dropped like a puppet with cut strings, dead before his body hit the concrete. Laura screamed and tried to run. 2 of Kim's men tackled her, slamming her face first into the floor, zip-tying her wrists behind her back. Kim's legs gave out. He collapsed, the concrete cold against his back, staring up at the warehouse's rusted ceiling. Phoebe was suddenly there, hands finally free, dropping to her knees beside him. No. Kim. Stay with me. He tried to speak but tasted blood. His hand found hers, slick and warm. Lila. The words came out wet. Lien, safe? Yes. Tears streamed down her battered face. They're safe. Lang has them. They're safe. Good. Kim's vision was blurring at the edges. That's all that matters. Don't you dare die on me. Phoebe's voice cracked. You owe me 14 months. You owe us a lifetime. Don't you dare leave me again. Kim tried to smile. Tried to tell her he loved her. Tried to say so many things. His eyes closed. Sirens. Someone screaming his name. The world fading to black. The emergency room was chaos, doctors shouting, nurses running, machines beeping urgent warnings. They cut away Kim's shirt, revealing the bullet wound high on his left chest, blood pulsing out with each heartbeat. Get him to surgery now. They wheeled him away. Phoebe tried to follow but a nurse caught her arm. Ma'am, you need to be treated too. I'm fine. She wasn't. Her ribs were broken, her face looked like she'd gone 3 rounds with a heavyweight, her head wound needed stitches. Just tell me if he's going to live. We're doing everything we can. 6 hours. 6 hours of pacing the waiting room while Lang sat in a corner holding both twins, rocking them gently, singing Korean lullabies in a voice rough with exhaustion. Lila and Lien had finally cried themselves to sleep against his chest, tiny hands fisted in his tactical vest. Phoebe refused to sit. Refused to be treated. Refused to do anything except watch that hallway for a surgeon to emerge. When the door finally opened at 6:47 a.m., she was there in seconds. The surgeon pulled down his mask, and his expression was carefully neutral. We almost lost him twice on the table. But we got the bullet out. It missed his heart by less than an inch. Nicked the pulmonary artery, that's what caused the bleeding. He's in ICU. Critical but stable. Phoebe's legs gave out. She would have hit the floor if Lang hadn't appeared beside her, steadying her with one arm while still holding both babies. He's alive, she whispered. Yes, ma'am. He's alive. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed, relief and exhaustion and trauma and 14 months of pain all crashing down at once. Lang just stood there holding her family, tears streaming silently down his own face. There's one more scene, the happily ever after. But before we get there, think about what you just witnessed. A man who literally died twice to save his family. A woman who forgave the unforgivable because she understood his pain. Babies who survived kidnapping and trauma. And now I'm asking, what kind of person are you? Are you someone who witnesses this kind of love, interracial, imperfect, hard-won, and walks away unchanged? Or are you someone who says, that mattered? I want more stories that make me believe in redemption. Subscribing takes 2 seconds. But it tells me this story, this message that broken people can heal, that love crosses every divide, that families come in all colors, meant something to you. Don't be the person who felt everything and did nothing. Subscribe. Then let's see their happy ending. Outside, dawn broke over Brooklyn. In Red Hook, police were cordoning off Warehouse 9. Dylan Wong's body was being zipped into a bag. Laura Martin was in handcuffs, screaming about lawyers and diplomatic immunity and her father's connections. None of it mattered. In a hospital room 52 floors above the city, Kim Soto was still breathing. That was all that mattered. Recovery was brutal. Kim spent 4 days in ICU, drifting in and out of consciousness, his body fighting to heal from trauma that should have killed him. When they finally moved him to a private room, the first thing he saw was Phoebe asleep in a chair beside his bed, her face still bruised, one arm in a sling from her own injuries she'd finally let them treat. She was holding Lila. The baby was awake, staring at her father with solemn eyes. "Hey, beautiful girl," Kim whispered. His voice was ruined from the ventilator. Phoebe's eyes opened immediately. For a moment they just looked at each other. "You're awake," she said. "I'm awake." She started crying. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet tears tracking down her cheeks as she held their daughter. "You died. Twice. Your heart stopped twice and they had to." "I know." Kim tried to reach for her but the 4 lines and monitors made it impossible. "I'm sorry. Don't apologize for taking a bullet for our children." Her voice was fierce. "Don't you dare." Lang visited daily, bringing Lien, who'd developed a terrible fear of being separated from his sister. The twins had to be together constantly now, reaching for each other, crying if they were apart for more than a few minutes. Trauma had forged them into a single unit. 3 weeks into recovery, Lang brought both babies for their afternoon visit. Kim was finally sitting up without help, could speak without his chest feeling like it was splitting open. Lien was in Lang's arms, staring at his father with those intense dark eyes that were carbon copies of Kim's own. Then, clear as a bell, "Dida." The room went silent. "Did he just," Lang started. "Dida." Lien repeated, reaching for Kim with both hands. Kim's face crumpled. Not silent tears this time. He broke down completely, shoulders shaking, hands over his face, sounds torn from somewhere deep that he'd kept locked away his entire life. Phoebe put Lila in the crib beside the bed and took Lien from Lang, carrying him to Kim. "Here. Hold your son. I'll hurt him. The stitches. You won't hurt him." She placed Lien in Kim's arms, careful of the bandages and 4 lines. "He needs his father." Lien immediately calmed, one hand patting Kim's face, the other gripping his finger. "Dida. Dida." Kim held his son and cried and didn't care who saw. The late-night conversation started during the worst hours, when pain medication wasn't enough and sleep wouldn't come. Phoebe would pull her chair close to the bed and they'd talk in whispers so the nurses wouldn't shoo her out. "My father said emotions were weakness," Kim told her one night, staring at the ceiling. "He ran his organization with an iron fist. No mercy. No softness. I watched him kill a man for crying once, said tears made you vulnerable. I grew up believing love would get people killed. But you loved me anyway, Phoebe said softly. I loved you so much it terrified me. When Dylan threatened you, I couldn't think straight. All I could see was what he'd done to others I'd cared about. So I pushed you away and told myself it was noble. It was just cowardice. Phoebe was quiet for a moment. I just wanted to be chosen, she finally said. Not for how I look. Not despite who I am. Just chosen. Completely. My whole life I felt like people were tolerating me, accepting me with conditions. When you divorced me, I thought you'd finally realized what everyone else already knew, that I was too much trouble. You were never too much. Kim turned his head to look at her. You were everything. One night, 6 weeks after the warehouse, Phoebe leaned over his hospital bed. She'd been helping him practice walking earlier, and now he was exhausted but awake, watching her with dark eyes that held too much emotion to name. She kissed him. Soft. Tentative. Wet with tears from both of them. We start over, she whispered against his lips. Slowly. One day at a time. I'll wait forever if I have to. 6 months later, the penthouse in Tribeca was just a memory. Kim had walked away from the Mafia completely, liquidating assets, severing ties, transitioning everything to a legitimate import-export business focused on Korean goods, art, textiles, traditional crafts. They'd moved to a quiet street in Queens, a neighborhood where Korean shops sat next to soul food restaurants, where kids played in languages their parents had crossed oceans to preserve. The brownstone had a small backyard, perfect for twin toddlers learning to walk. Phoebe enrolled in community college, taking business management classes while Kim handled bedtime routines. She also started therapy, twice-a-week sessions focused on abandonment trauma and racial wounds that ran deeper than either of them had realized. Kim attended every parent-teacher night, every pediatrician appointment, every playground visit. He taught Lila and Leanne Korean words while Phoebe taught them about their Black heritage. They were raising children who belonged to both worlds completely. On a Saturday afternoon, watching Lila chase bubbles while Leanne dug determinedly in his sandbox, Kim pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Phoebe. She looked up from the lawn chair where she'd been reading, pushing her sunglasses up. He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band engraved with Lila, Leanne, Phoebe in both English and Korean characters. You gave me a family when I didn't deserve one, Kim said, dropping to one knee in their backyard while their children played obliviously. You forgave me when I didn't deserve forgiveness. You loved me across every divide, culture, race, fear. Will you marry me again? Not for protection. Not for strategy. Because I love you. Completely. Tears streamed down Phoebe's face. Yes. 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring on. They kissed while Lila squealed with delight and Leanne threw sand everywhere, completely unaware they were witnessing their parents' second engagement. Later that evening, after the twins were asleep and they were curled together on the couch, Phoebe took Kim's hand and placed it on her belly. You won't miss this one, she said softly. Kim's eyes widened. You're 8 weeks. This time, you'll be there for everything. Every appointment. Every midnight craving. Every moment. He dropped to his knees in front of her, pressed his face against her stomach, and cried. I'll be there. I swear it. I won't miss a single second. On a Sunday morning 3 months later, you'd find them in the park, just another young family enjoying the weekend. Kim pushing Lila and Leanne on the swings, their laughter filling the air. Phoebe on a nearby bench, one hand resting on her growing belly, watching her family with a smile that had taken 14 months and a bullet to finally return. To anyone passing by, they were ordinary. No one knew the man pushing the swings once ruled New York's underworld. No one knew the woman on the bench survived abandonment, poverty, and violence. They were just a family. the most dangerous Korean mafia boss in New York discovered that real power didn't live in fear or violence or empires built on blood. Real power lived in 3 hearts, soon to be 4, that had forgiven him and given him a reason to become better. Some stories end with bullets and betrayal. But the most beautiful love stories end with ordinary days, mixed-race babies learning 2 languages, and the promise of countless ordinary days still to come.